Hey everyone, it's Braulio Rosa with the Broward Bar Buzz, and I'm excited because I have the very victorious John Uustal here, the attorney for Flo Rida in the recent case that he won for him, $82 million. Wow. John, welcome, man.
Thank you. Very victorious. I've never had anyone say that about me before. I like it.
Dude, I mean, that was a huge win.
Yeah,
That was,
that's true.
it was big. Big.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, first, let's do the easy stuff. What's it like working with Flo Rida?
Well, he's a really nice guy. You know, I didn't know what to expect when I first met him, but so many people in the courthouse would stop, ask for selfies, and he would always stop, and he was just really, really nice. I was impressed with what a decent human being he was. Sometimes even to the point where I was like, we got to get into the courtroom. You know, we don't have forever, but he was a really nice guy.
And how did, you touched a little bit on the fan base. Did that impact you directly at all? Did you have he's obviously super famous. Did you have fans trying to contact you at Kelly Uustal through the offices to get information or even, try to get info at the courthouse as you're walking up to the courtroom?
Maybe after the verdict, before the litigation went on for years, it wasn't that public. It wasn't covered that extensively in the press. Once the verdict started, walking into the courtroom, there were cameras. Working into the courthouse, outside the courthouse, there were cameras, news, print reporters in the courtroom. So yeah, that thing started to change when the trial started.
How do you manage that? This kind of zoo or media frenzy, because obviously it's Flo Rida. So as an attorney, how do you manage that so that you could focus on representing your client and at the same time making sure your client is, I don't know if it's accessible, but so his fans still love him, right? So how do you manage that whole?
Well, that's a really good question because you're trying to do a few things all at once, and sometimes they're contradictory. Something you're trying to do to help make sure you have a smooth presentation at trial might not be perfect for the reputation of the artist. Was fortunate enough to have been involved in some high-profile cases over the last 2 decades with other lawyers, and I saw how they handled it. And if I had just, if I hadn't, and then on my own several times, so that when this happened, I wasn't totally unprepared. If I had been, it would have been a problem. A small example is like I just said, you got to be in the courtroom when the judge is ready to go. Even if a lot of people are trying to get selfies, right?
Right.
That's just one example. But if there's footage of the celebrity client blowing off people for selfies that appears on the news, that's not good for his artistic reputation, for his fan base. And it's not good for the trial either. You never know who sees that. So. You got to try to manage all those different things, and that's just a small example. There's larger issues too, and I think it just comes from a little bit of experience.
Can you elaborate at all on some of the bigger issues that maybe you had to encounter that stressed you out as you were doing this?
Well, look, when someone like me is deciding whether to file a lawsuit or not. Thank God I haven't ever been in a serious car crash, but if I was, even a simple car crash, the factors that I would take into account have to do with the risk of winning, what would happen if we lost, the hassle of going through a trial, what the defense might try to say about me. But with a celebrity, there's many, many other issues, okay? And especially when you're not talking about a car crash, but an endorsement deal, right? How will it affect future endorsement deals? How will it affect how other companies look at me? How will it affect my fan base, right? Will it affect music sales? Also, do I want to be spending time on this when, for most people who are at least in the musical artists, but even other celebrities, actors, and they got into the field because that's what they're passionate about. Talking about Flo Rida, he loves making music, not sitting in a courtroom for a week. So there are other issues that you have to think through to try to make the right move. And sometimes for celebrities, sometimes I've thought and recommended that the lawsuit's not worth it, or when you take into all the other factors, even if you're going to win. And of course, those decisions are made not just by the lawyer.
Right. So talking about that, these nuances, how do you prepare for a jury trial? I mean, there's got to be different biases maybe that you have to consider when you're going to be choosing your jury and how you approach it, because maybe some folks would think, well, this guy's already rich. Why is, he wants more money from these people? Just thinking off the top of my head. So is there a different way you would prepare than like the typical mom and pop case that you're dealing with?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But on the other hand, every case is customized. I mean, I think every trial lawyer would say that, right? If it's not this issue, then it's that issue. So, right, I think every defense lawyer and plaintiff's lawyer has had a case where there's a plaintiff or a defendant who's wealthy. Maybe less common is someone who's a celebrity. You have to worry how that affects things. What type of celebrity? Flo Rida is considered, in my mind, and certainly my wife's a pop star, right? He's a crossover artist. There's no doubt about it. 100 million records sold. I mean, he's a crossover artist. But some people might think of him as a rapper. Well, what does that, and then are there some people maybe a lot older than you, but that have stereotypical views of rappers, right? So, yeah, but that's true in every case, that there are specific things that you have to think about in order to make sure you get a fair jury.
Rapper, I don't know. My wife likes the apple bottom jeans song.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember hearing that song over and over in the car. Yeah. So that was kind of rap, I guess, or dancing music.
Well, yeah, no, if you ask him, he would say he is a hip hop artist, but look, the crossover appeal is just, sure. It's just, he's playing in the Super Bowl, and, everybody knows his songs. There may be some people who don't know his name, but I don't think there's anyone who doesn't recognize some of those songs.
And he's a local South Florida guy?
Oh, yeah. He grew up in Carroll City.
Wow. Okay. Good deal. So, I know you as a personal injury guy. You're the guy that comes in. You're the cleanup guy. You're one of the best. You come in and you deal with these high profile or terrible catastrophic injury cases, and you win. This is different. This is not a guy that, I guess he got hurt financially, injured, but it's not a physical injury. So this is contractual, I'm guessing. So how different is that, and how do you prepare versus when you're dealing with, someone that was terribly injured?
Look, working up those cases are different. We have, at John Uustal, we have a commercial contingency division. We only take those cases on contingency, but because the type of law firm we are. Right. But we do those cases. Those cases go to trial less. I guess these days a lot of cases settle more than 20 years ago. Less
right.
cases go to trial, but I would say that's even more true in commercial cases. In the courtroom. Yeah, it's different even in the courtroom because it can be very complicated. Let's say you have a car crash case. There may be a catastrophic outcome, and the jury's got to decide who ran the red light, and that's a factual determination, and they got to weigh witnesses.
And you have this poor victim.
Yeah.
That more often than not, I'm guessing, demonstrates outwardly some physical permanent injuries that I would think juries would be sympathetic towards.
I disagree about that, and I disagree in both ways. In other words, I've never found a jury that didn't feel it was important to enforce a contract. I've never had, this plaintiff is wealthy. I've had that many times. Look, a contract's a contract, and so I've never felt that a plaintiff in a smaller company or an individual or a celebrity or a wealthy person who's trying to enforce a contract that there's any bias against them among jurors. So I don't think it's harder to win a commercial contingency case. I don't want to jinx myself, but I've never lost a trial. Never lost.
Oh,
so
let's knock on wood here.
Yeah, and I think juries are fair. I mean, they understand, like, our whole life is built on enforcement of contracts. I mean, if contracts weren't enforced, I mean, like, the whole house of cards would come crumbling down. You know, you couldn't buy a car, you couldn't build a car, So I don't think those are harder for that reason. I also disagree because I think that juries are good at, look, I think it's fair for a jury to say in a medical malpractice case, hey, if this hospital loses, if this doctor loses, that's a serious thing, right? So and in any case, insurance, just regular car accident, rates could go up. They're not really supposed to consider that. But look, I just believe in our jury system. I don't think that jurors have a fundamental, I don't even want to use the word bias, but I don't think that there's any type of advantage to an injured person against a big company. I found that jurors are fair. Listen, I have lost catastrophic injury cases in the courtroom, and my first instinct was always, what was that jury thinking? But in hindsight, I've always come to realize why. I think juries get it right. I really do. So I believe in the system, and I don't think there's anyone's got an advantage. I really don't.
Okay. Well, I mean, I hope you're right. I think we all come to the table. I don't know what other word to use other than biases. You have experiences, life experiences, and you grow up certain ways. And so it's not a bias, but it's something that you think because you've experienced it so many times. So how does your life inform some of your thought processes and decisions?
Yeah, that's a much better way to put it. And that's absolutely true. If you've been bitten by a German Shepherd 15 times and then there's a case where someone's saying, I got bit by that's probably not a good case for you to sit on. Yeah. But the law in Florida is very, very clear on that. Both litigants are entitled to a fair jury, and the lawyers and the judge need to explore that. And so the law is good, and in general, as far as I've seen, look, I think in other states too. I've tried cases in many states. I've never said, "Ooh, the law here is so bad on jury selection, we got an unfair jury." Right. But I think Florida takes it a little bit up a notch to say, "Hey, this is fundamental to the system. We must have a fair jury without anyone who has life experiences that might make them unfair for this case."
Okay, so tell me about the process of how do you demonstrate that Flo Rida, so he had this contract, this agreement, endorsement with Celcius, and I guess he was going to get X amount of dollars according to how much their value of their company increased over time. And so how do you go about showing that correlation? Because I know that there were other influencers that would be on YouTube and I guess in other places showing the Celcius can or whatever and promoting it. So I'm assuming that Celcius could have said, well, we had all these other people doing things. So how do you demonstrate that correlation of Flo Rida was the guy and this is why their company increased in value?
So there was evidence in the trial about that, and for both parties, Celcius and the case that I put on. We both thought that it was important for context, but it wasn't the critical legal issue. Okay, so I said in opening, here's this little company, I think 12 employees, right near his backyard where he grew up. He falls in love with the product, and he becomes a spokesman, and all these great things happen. And eventually, after the company does a lot of great things and makes smart business decisions, it becomes a multi-billion-dollar company. So, and that's all true. What the defense said, which is also true, A lot of the increase in the value of the stock happened after the endorsement deal had ended. But that's context. The legal issue is, were the benchmarks in the contract met, and when? Because if the benchmarks were met by a certain point, then, and there was also an issue about deadlines, because one provision of the contract had a deadline, one didn't. But if the benchmarks are met, then a certain amount of stock is supposed to be issued. And there was 500,000 under one clause, 250,000 on another clause, so it's 750,000 shares of stock. The law doesn't allow us to order the corporation to issue the stock, so the only thing the jury can do is put a numerical value on the stock, and luckily, on a publicly traded company, it's pretty easy. The judge took judicial notice of the Wall Street Journal website where the stock price was listed, and in the last day of evidence, it was $110, and they found we were entitled to all 750,000 shares of stock. So that's how you get that number.
Holy moly. It's pretty scientific in that sense, then. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Pretty straightforward for, straightforward economics or accounting.
Yeah, there was evidence that he really wanted this stock to. He considered it like a generational wealth thing. Look, you have to understand, the stock was practically worthless when the deal was done. He was betting that the company something great would happen. He believed in the product. He believed in the management, and that vision came true. So now it is worth. But there was evidence at trial that he wanted to, pass that on to his kids, and as what he called generational wealth.
Right. Smart. So what was the worst part of the case, and what was the best part for you of the whole experience?
There's no bad parts of being in trial for me. I love it.
Okay.
I love being in the courtroom.
What was the best experience that you experienced during this process?
It's always I'll tell you, I was surprised by one thing. It's always emotional when the verdict comes in, because it's emotional for my clients and it's emotional for me, because I think it was Jerry Spence said that when you lose a case, it's just pure agony. It's physically painful. And when you win, it's just relief you didn't lose. Okay, it's not some great thing. It's just relief, but that relief is something serious, because if when you lose a case, at least for me, it feels like the jury is saying, "I didn't believe you." Right? I have the privilege of taking only cases that I want to take. So
it's personal, almost, to a certain degree.
Well, it's just that, I would say it like, I think this case should be won. Otherwise, I wouldn't have taken it. Right. I took it because I believe it's a righteous case. So to lose is really to feel, at least from my perspective, that the jury is saying, we don't trust you, we don't believe you, we don't like you, which, I maybe am
sensitive.
Too sensitive to that, but I want people to like me, and it really is agony, you're sitting there and it takes a few minutes for the jurors to leave the courtroom, and you're just sitting there devastated, trying not to. So anyway, it's relief when you win, and my clients always feel it too, but I didn't really expect it so much in this case.
What did Flo Rida say to you?
Well,
when you won?
He hugged me. There's a picture. I think with the Broward Bar put that out too. It was on some newspapers or something, and I think you posted it too. Because it is it just shows that emotional moment of relief, and there's a lot at stake. There was a lot at stake for him, because, for him, to lose would have been a bad thing far beyond money.
Would have reflected maybe negatively, you think, in terms of his career, in a sense, or his fan base?
It would have been as painful to him as it was to me, and for reasons that aren't true for people who aren't celebrities. Yeah, so So yeah, he was very emotional, and I was too. But I always am. So anyway, I guess that was maybe the most
relief.
surprising part. And I should say, the lawyers for Celcius were really some of the most professional lawyers that I've ever gone up against. All through, they actually got involved in the litigation at the last minute. There was a prior law firm, but Holland and Knight got involved near the end, and they were not only really professional and ethical in everything they did, but they really were some of the best lawyers I've ever gone up against.
Oh. That's big coming from you. I'm going to ask you one last thing, because I've heard you, we've talked a lot, I've started to get to know you pretty well. We've been doing these together. And you use a word to describe your cases, and I want you to define what that means to you. You say a righteous case. What do you mean by that?
Well, the way we use that in the law firm is, look, everything's every law firm has to stay in business or they can't do anything. So sometimes a case will come in. I remember there was a certain kind of case where if a company did something, I think it had to do with faxes or something. Look, I'm not criticizing anyone for how they make a living, but people were somebody said, look, we could do these cases, and yeah, legally we'd have won, but it's not a righteous case. In other words, it's not something, look, we were up, my team was up all night before closing argument in this case. We were up all night because we cared, because it mattered if we won, right? And so, over some faxes, that's not a righteous case. I'm not saying it's not legally should be won and somebody should take it, but for us, it's got to be the one we're willing to stay up all night for, and not just me, my team. People who I get the privilege to work with, and my partners, I think it's fair to say that they want to work at John Uustal and they want to be part of our team because of what we do, right? We take cases that matter. We try to. We believe in it, and I'm kind of proud. The proudest thing I am of is the cases that we've taken that many other law firms have turned down. I was speaking at a conference with 5,000 lawyers, and it was great. There was like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and there were famous people, and they introduced me as the lawyer who takes cases no one else wants. I thought, well, that's not exactly how I would put it. But what the truth of it in it is, we've taken cases that many other law firms have turned down for really devastatingly injured people, like a little girl. I think we talked about the pressure cooker case.
The pressure cooker. We have the mad scientist here in the room with us that helped on that, by the way, Roland.
That's a good name for him. Let's change his business card to mad scientist. But yeah, like we couldn't have done that without him, but he's part of the team that was willing to really do it. But that was for a little girl who had 3 amputations and, catastrophic burns. But couldn't find a lawyer, right? In the sense that other lawyers had turned it down. So, and we keep track of cases. We've got one where 13 law firms turned it down before we took it and won. So that's what I mean. I would say it differently than they introduced me, but like that's a righteous case, that deserves to be won. It's important to win it for the family, and maybe even for society.
Wow. John Uustal, thank you for everything you do for our community, going out there and taking those righteous cases that are tough. Appreciate you coming, talking to me today about Flo Rida.
Sure, absolutely. Glad to be here.
See you all later. Thank you for being with us.